being the two prongs for 2018, are not actually that bad. The other prong obviously has to be the insanity of the left and why these people should never be in charge of anything. The latest reason is because of this. There's a new study out today with regard to Medicare for all. Okay, so this has been the call from insane nut job Bernie Sanders. So Bernie Sanders, when he is not stuffing his face with pudding, believes that we ought to have Medicare for all. Now, Medicare is basically a blanket coverage for people who are old, but he wants that now applied to everyone. He essentially wants a government nationalized healthcare system. He says that this will pay for everything. It'll pay for itself. Whenever he is asked, people will ask him, so how do you pay for this, Bernie? He says, that's not important. What's important is that Europe finds a way to pay for all of this. And Europe has fantastic healthcare. Okay, first of all, Europe has 65% tax rates. These healthcare systems are bankrupting countries. And the fact is that they've had cutbacks in a lot of these areas. They've had to bring in immigrants to simply staff the medical profession in places like the National Health Service in Great Britain. These are all much smaller countries, too. I mean, when he talks about Norway or Denmark, these are places that have a population less than the population of LA County alone. And homogenous and engaged in the same culture. And, it's a lot, let's put it this way. It's not easy to scale a nationalized healthcare system to a system of 300, just on an effectiveness level. Forget about the fact that it is an invasion of people's rights and that it's not my job to pay for your healthcare because your healthcare is yours. Right? It's my job to pay for my healthcare, my kids' healthcare, my family's healthcare. It's my job to help out with people who I want to help out with regard to charity. But it is not my job to pay for your healthcare because if I'm paying for your healthcare, that creates a perverse incentive system where you can go make a bunch of decisions that are not great for your health, knowing somebody else is going to pick up the tab and access health services at a faster pace. All of that said, the effectiveness of these healthcare systems abroad, there are a bunch of different types of systems. Everybody sort of thinks that there are two systems. There's the free market system, and then there's the nationalized system. This is not true. There are a bunch of different types of system. The Swiss system is a lot more privatized than, for example, the Nordic system. The Swiss system works great, and the Nordic system works pretty well too. There are differences between how they work. They both work, but part of the reason they both work is because they had functioning healthcare systems before they actually had a nationalized healthcare system in Sweden, for example, or in Norway. And the reason for that is, again, because lifestyle differences and cultural differences in these places, these are not the same places as the United States. You have to take these things into account. You can't just take something that works in Denmark and assume it's going to work in the United States. That's idiotic. That's not how policy actually operates. Anyway, Bernie Sanders says he wants Medicare for all. So there's a new study out today from the Mercatus Center at George Mason University in Virginia. Now, the left is saying that this study is nonsense. It's nonsense. How do we know that it's nonsense? We know that it's nonsense because, after all, it was funded by the Koch brothers. Well, how about this? There's another study from the left-wing Urban Institute. They estimated the cost of Medicare for all. Here's what they came up with. $32 trillion over the next 10 years. $32 trillion. That is twice the annual GDP of the United States. It is double the annual federal budget every single year. Okay, it's another $4 trillion of federal budget every year. And there's a study from this Mercatus Center, and they say it'll cost $32.6 trillion over 10 years. According to Bloomberg, Bernie Sanders' plan builds on Medicare. All U.S. residents would be covered with no copays and deductibles for medical services. The insurance industry would be relegated to a minor role. Charles Blauhaus is the study's author. He was a senior economic advisor to former President Bush and a public trustee of Social Security and Medicare during the Obama administration. So this is not a partisan hack. He says enacting something like Medicare for all would be a transformative change in the size of the federal government. We'll talk about a little bit more about this proposal and why it's going to fail and why Democrats $2.6 trillion. How much money is $32.6 trillion? Tiana Lowe over on Twitter, she says that is nearly twice our annual GDP. It's 54 times our annual defense spending. It's over 8 times our annual federal budget. It's 281 times the private sector's annual medical R&D investment. It is 867 times the federal government's annual medical R&D investment. And by the way, Medicaid covers 1 in 3 Californians and nearly 40% of LA residents. And since the ACA expansion, Medi-Cal providers went from barely breaking even to making $5.4 billion in profits from 2014 to 2016. Okay, so this is ridiculous. Okay, by the way, the statistics I'm citing about, it's 867 times the federal government's annual medical R&D investment, right? We are talking about over 10 years, but still, it is twice our annual GDP, $32.6 trillion. It's an enormous blowout in spending. Now, Bernie Sanders doesn't have any actual argument with these statistics. He just doesn't like that the Koch brothers funded this particular study. But again, the Urban Institute says it'll cost $32 trillion as well. It turns out that covering people's health care endlessly means that you're going to spend endless amounts of money. Dan McLaughlin over at National Review, he has a framework for understanding healthcare, and here's what he says. He says, basically, you can have three things in healthcare. You can have affordability, you can have universality, you can have quality. You can only have two of those three things. You cannot have all three. Again, affordability, universality, quality. It can either be cheap, or it can be universal, everybody can have it, or it can be good. So it can be good and it can be affordable, but not everybody's going to have it, right? It's a free market system. You can have universal and cheap, but then it's going to be kind of crappy. You can have universal and good, but then it's going to be really expensive, right? So you can only have two of these particular three things. Bernie Sanders says you can have all three because he is lying to you. I love this. Bernie Sanders' office, they say that this estimate is bad, but their office has not done a cost analysis. Wait, you mean a lazy socialist who didn't bother doing his homework? I can't believe it. That's crazy. Bernie Sanders' staff did find an error in an initial version of the Mercatus report, which counted a long-term care program that was in the 2016 proposal, but not the current one, which means it will merely cost $29.6 trillion as opposed to $32.6 trillion. Oh, well, that fixes everything. And by the way, you could remove every dollar from every rich person in the United States. It would not pay for this for more than a year. Okay, so this idea that you're going to somehow fund all of this is just insane. The study estimated that doubling all federal, individual, and corporate income taxes would not fully cover the additional costs. So all of this sounds great. All this sounds nice. How are you going to pay for it? The answer is you ain't. You ain't. Because Democrats have no interest in paying for this stuff. If you actually want to help cut healthcare costs, by the way, in the United States, there is a way to do it. What you actually have to do is ease regulation, particularly when it comes to all of the administrative paperwork. Dealing with all the regulation is what doctors do most of the time. You may have heard, my wife is a doctor. Okay, being a doctor, that means she has to deal with paperwork on a near constant basis. And when you own your own office, you have to deal with Medicare and Medicaid. Many doctors have stopped working with the government because they don't want to deal with all of the regulations and all the paperwork. The New York Times has a piece out just a couple of weeks ago saying that it only takes a glance at a hospital bill or at the myriad choices you may have for healthcare coverage to get a sense of the bewildering complexity of healthcare financing in the United States. The complexity doesn't just exact a cognitive cost, it comes with administrative costs. In 1999, the New England Journal of Medicine, which is the premier journal of medicine in the United States, they estimated that about 30% of all American healthcare expenditures were the result of administration. In other words, dealing with insurance companies, working with the government, trying to deal with regulation, all that stuff is expensive. And you know who gets charged for it? You do. And your insurance company does. There are ways to cut down on that, but that means deregulation, which is precisely the opposite of what the left actually wants to do. It also turns out, by the way, that in nationalized healthcare systems, there's a lot of paperwork as well. This idea that it solves everything to be nationalized is just not true either. So this is what's so ridiculous about this. The Democrats come forward with their proposals for 2018. This is where Trump really should be hitting them. What Trump should be saying is you can't allow these people to be in charge, because if you put these people in charge, it's going to be a disaster. Okay, their policy proposals are insane. Another policy proposal it just shows how asinine the left's take on economics is.
In many respects, given the changing economy, a college degree is the equivalent of what a high school degree was 40 years ago. That means to me that what we have to do is make a simple statement, and that is that we will make public colleges and universities tuition free. Now, how are you going to pay for that? During my campaign for the presidency, I proposed a tax on Wall Street speculation, which would have more than covered the cost of making public colleges and universities.
Wall Street speculation, and he's using old 1930s socialist language. Wall Street speculation, in other words, 401ks, people putting their money in SEP IRAs that invest in stocks and bonds. And this is just, it's utter nonsense. It's utter nonsense. And when he says things like, he's going to make tuition free and college is what high school used to be. Why do you think college is what high school used to be? Why do you think that is? It's because of a watered-down public education system and people insisting that everybody have a college degree in order to go to work in a particular industry, even if you're majoring in poli-sci, English, or lesbian dance theory. That's why you're seeing a watering down of college. The solution to that is to have employers start to recognize qualities in employees after high school, and to make our high school curricula better, and to make our high schools better, to make our general public schools better, not to shove more people into an overburdened education, a higher education system where people learn stupid crap. I understand that you're desperate to learn about art history, but there aren't a lot of art history jobs out there. It's not a major that tends to generate, name the art historians who are working art historians. Not people who have an art history major who got a job in something else. The working art historians. What are they, 10? Okay, but he's saying everybody has to go to college, and who will pay for it? Of course the rich people. Of course the rich, they will always pay the rich people because they are an endless grab bag of loot. Except for the fact that the reason that a lot of the rich people are rich is because they're the ones who are hiring a lot of the other people. The reason you hire people, it's amazing how few people understand like really, truly basic economics. The reason you hire somebody is because they create surplus value for you. If they don't create surplus value for you, you don't hire them. If you can fix your toilet the best yourself in the quickest amount of time, then guess what? You're going to fix your own toilet. You hire a plumber because he frees you up to do other things, creating surplus value for you. Well, rich people who hire lots of people have more surplus value. That's why they're hiring people. They hire lots of people, and those people create, in aggregate, more surplus value. If you get rid of the surplus value, are they going to maintain the employment, or are they going to fire people?